welcome to a new episode of the Mid Post. Some of the NBA's best playoff previews are still showing during this last full month of the season, and as promised, after digging into potential Western Conference playoff matchups, trends, and analysis last week, today we'll be uncovering the Eastern Conference playoffs and a few of the potential teams and even matchups we might see. So without further ado, I want to get right into it. So with the West, I started out with the teams that I felt were the big three running the conference, and then I followed up with the next four teams who were nice, but maybe not as much of a threat as the big three. Well, with the East, I decided to start with the Fantastic Four and then the bottom three, because believe it or not, the East is just as competitive, if not more, than the West is. I know that sounds crazy on the surface, but you will soon see why that is the case. Every time I tried to sit down and prepare my notes for today's show, I couldn't get over the fact that unlike the totem pole that we have in the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference is a doggone charcuterie board. You may have different types of crackers and different types of cheeses, and maybe even some grapes, but at the end of the day, everybody's really eating the same thing. So let's get into the chaos and start our attack with the Fantastic Four: the Detroit Pistons, the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, I separated a lot of these teams with, or at least the teams in the Fantastic Four. I gave them nicknames or names that will embody who they are and what they represent during the playoffs. And I want to start with the Detroit Pistons, obviously, with them being the 1 seed right now in the East. And to me, they are the Eastern Conference Prizefighter. This is a 2000s to early 2010s style of hoops in modern design that the Detroit Pistons play. Not perfect roster construction, but just a team that finds a way to unify and still be successful. They're not the flashiest. They're not crazy from beyond the arc. They don't play a lot of pretty basketball, but they are a team that gets the job done and have still proven to be one of the better teams in the NBA despite their recent losing streak. This is a team that is led by a bigger guard by the name of Cade Cunningham. Not sure if you heard of him, playing really great basketball this year. This is a guy with all-around game. He takes on that LeBron-esque archetype, really. This is a guy that creates for himself in the half court. He thrives in transition. He can defend multiple positions because of his size, so he fits his team not just on offense, but on defense as well. And he knows how to find his teammates and create easy baskets for those guys. We know what Cade Cunningham can bring to the table. That goes without saying. They also have strong interior depth that is led by Jalen Duren, the other all-star of the team, who's averaging career best 18 points per game, along with 10.8 rebounds per game. This is a player that has a strong body, a vintage body. I know on my former show, Hip to the Games, I compared his body to David Robinson. He reminds me a lot of that same old school chisel. He's a physical backline defender. This is a perfect anchor for their defense, somebody that's not afraid of contact. But sometimes I do question if Jalen Duren is as dominant as he could be. He's not the best low post player, despite the size that he has, the ability to, you would think he would have the ability to use his strength a lot more down there, but he doesn't always do that. He actually prefers to attack from face-ups a lot of times and hits defenders with impressive guard-like dribble moves. He did it in Sunday's game versus Miami. He had a nice behind the back into what I believe was a low pickup layup. Like, he looked like a guard, and that's scary. I think it's scary in the sense when you picture that as a supplement to low post game, but it isn't as scary because he relies on that the most. And that's something that I think he could do a better job with. I think he's a really good role man. He's shown that over the course of the season. He's agile for his size, and I think he can get even better if he can improve that low post presence. But nonetheless, Jalen Duren is an important part of this Detroit Pistons basketball team. Another guy that's important in the front court is Isaiah Stewart, who's averaging 10 points, around 5 rebounds, 1.7 blocks per game off the bench. Having a little bit of I think it's kind of fizzled out, but he did have a little bit of a Defensive Player of the Year campaign going for himself early on in the season, which is very impressive considering he comes off the bench for this team. But this is a guy that, like Duren, is very physical. Like Duren, is a strong, intimidating presence on the defensive end. But this is a guy who brings the floor spacing from beyond the arc that Jalen Duren doesn't have. And it's not to say that Isaiah Stewart is some knockdown shooter, but he's very respectable. But of course, the main highlight with Isaiah Stewart is that he anchors the mess out of that defense. Fun fact, Isaiah Stewart has the lowest total defensive field goal percentage this season at 42.9 at the time of this recording. This is among players who have played at least 40 games. And then to piggyback off that, his 48% defensive field goal percentage, less than 6 feet, is very impressive as well, considering that these shots are closer to the basket and it can be very easy for guards to get in there and shoot well over 50%, even 60% because it's so close to the basket. This is a guy that's still holding matchups to under 50% for some of the easiest shots that you'll find in the game. So that's really good. If the eye test didn't do it enough, the numbers certainly back up the fact that Isaiah Stewart is actually the best intimidator in the entire NBA. Again, I know Victor Wembanyama would have something to say about that, but hey, you can't sleep on the undersized Isaiah Stewart who's doing it old school style. So shout out to Stu. And then they even have Paul Reed out there who doesn't play a ton of minutes, but plays a lot of spot minutes and still gives them reliable rebounding abilities and sneaky offense in limited minutes. I think he's essentially Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart combined. This is a guy that can stretch the floor on occasion, does a lot more than you would think off the dribble, but still has the physicality to get dirty and clean up the glass and do a lot of those dirty work responsibilities for the Detroit Pistons. So I love what the Detroit Pistons have as far as their front court. And it shouldn't go without saying that this team is so successful because they still have respectable scoring, shooting, and or defense from their role players. Tobias Harris, I've mentioned before that I love his role with this Detroit Pistons team. He is a consistent mid-post option for this team. He's not the glamorous second scoring option that we've all envisioned Detroit having at some point down the line, but he does get the job done in the role that he has. I think Duncan Robinson was an incredible pickup this offseason, giving them elite shooting and floor spacing this season. And I think the big thing we need to mention with Duncan Robinson is that this is not a guy that's limited from putting the ball on the floor, unlike his earlier days in Miami. In the past, we saw Duncan Robinson prevent the Miami Heat from really having expressing some offensive dexterity because he just wasn't willing to put the ball on the floor and finish at the basket. But he worked on his game and gradually improved. And now the Detroit Pistons, like the Miami Heat a couple seasons ago, are able to be the beneficiary of his improvement as an individual player. So he's not just a shooter, and I think that's been huge for this team. Of course, there's Asar Thompson, who is an elite defender, really growing as a glue guy for this team. And if you've been paying attention, has really started to improve his handle, which is going to allow him to open up his offensive production as another ball handler alongside Cade, somebody to drive and kick and create opportunities for others. So where there's not a ton of responsibility on Cade, where other teammates can step in and take that load off of him, and he can focus on getting buckets as well. You have the hustlers, Ron Holland, Javonte Green, excellent hustle guys. And these are guys that can hit open threes. I know Ron Holland's 23% from three-point land is not the sexiest number, but when you watch him play, he is still capable of hitting open shots. He's just got to get better at that consistency aspect of it. But those are two hustle guys that fit right with the new school Detroit basketball that we're seeing this season. And then the important thing for the Pistons as they go into the playoffs especially is how their X factors play. And the X factors that I believe are on this team are Dennis Jenkins, Karis LeVert, and Kevin Huerter. Kevin Huerter has not played well since being traded from Chicago. Even when he was in Sacramento, started to trail off in his production, in his shooting, wasn't really the same player we had seen around the early 2020s. But this is a guy that, when given the opportunity, you're going to close out when he shoots the ball. If he can put together some good games for this team, he's going to be a very key X factor in the Pistons championship hopes. Karis LeVert, this is another guy that's similar to Kevin Huerter, isn't the same player that he was in Brooklyn or Indiana, but this is a guy that's going to have opportunity and should be able to take some pressure off Cade, or at least look to take pressure off Cade, even if it's not all the way what he was doing back in those days. I'm not saying that this brother has to get 20 points a game, but I am a little disappointed that he's under 10 points a game, way too much for this team. They're going to need some players to step up and get buckets and create for others and it can't just be on Cade. And Karis LeVert has to tap into that role again if the Detroit Pistons are going to be successful and have the playoff run of their dreams. And then the last guy is the two-way guy who got converted to a standard contract, Danis Jenkins. He's going to be huge as well, but he has to find a way to be consistent in those 15 to 20 minute games that he plays and not relying on just the big minutes to make big impact. When you watch a lot of Danis Jenkins, a lot of his bigger games came when he was getting those 30-minute per game appearances without Cade Cunningham. But he's got to learn to bring that same edge and that same impact in the games where Cade Cunningham plays. And he has been able to do that. But again, when it comes to the playoffs, he's got to be more consistent with that. So those are the three X factors that I'm really urging the Detroit Pistons to get the most out of as they head into the playoffs. And the biggest thing that I've noticed about the Detroit Pistons is that, quite frankly, they just break the will of their opponents. And that's why I see them as the prize fighter here. They have active hands, they play physical defense, and they're capable of doing it without fouling. Even though they have a league-leading fouls per game average this year, this is a team that goes on stretches where they're getting steals and they're getting deflections and they're getting blocked shots and they're running on the other end and they're doing it without fouling. That's going to be huge for this team. And even with that in mind, turning turnovers into points is major for the Detroit Pistons, that they maintain their bread and butter going into the playoffs, creating transition points when in an environment where the game generally slows down. This team is first in steals per game at 10.6. They're second in the NBA in points off turnovers with 21.5. It's their bread and butter. And this type of defense that they play affects teams' mental as much as the physical / tangible aspects of the game. And this is why many teams haven't been able to hang. They're playing the basketball that we didn't think was going to last well into the 2020s. They are literally in some ways breaking the game of basketball by still finding a way to play dirty basketball, ugly basketball, and win a lot of games. But they have to translate it to the playoffs. And that brings me to the big question of the Detroit Pistons segment. Will they have enough to deliver a knockout punch? True character is revealed when they are missing shots. And that is the biggest thing with the Detroit Pistons. How are they going to play when they're missing shots? This team is first in the NBA in points in the paint. And this creates a tough dynamic for the Detroit Pistons when their threes aren't falling. They are shooting 34.6% from three. This is second worst among all playoff teams, second only to the Orlando Magic. I'm paying attention to that going into the playoffs. The fact that the Detroit Pistons, clearly with their best record in the East, they've been able to stay in games even when their three-point shooting isn't the best. That's an excellent sign. But it does expose the flaw that they are one very important piece away from truly being a championship team. Dare I say there is a Kawhi Leonard or a Kyrie Irving-sized hole on the Detroit Pistons roster that'll be perfect for what they have going on. But until they either develop that piece or acquire that piece, it won't be as good as what they're trying to do this season. Now, there are some good signs for the Detroit Pistons. They've had great regular season success against playoff teams. They're 3-1 versus Boston, which of course changes a little bit now that they got a guy named Jayson Tatum back in their lineup. But the Detroit Pistons have done well against the Celtics, 3-1 this year. They're 2-2 versus Cleveland. They're 3-0 versus the Knicks, 1-0 versus OKC, but they are 0-2 versus the San Antonio Spurs. So there's some makes and misses in there, but for the most part, they've done well versus the better teams in the league. But again, when it comes to the playoffs and everybody starts at zero, it becomes a whole different game. And the difference between what teams like the Knicks, the Celtics, the Cavs, the Spurs, the Thunder have in the playoffs is that they have two scoring options that they can rely on. With the Detroit Pistons, a lot of that pressure is on Cade Cunningham. And they will be forced to rely on shooting to alleviate that pressure from Cade Cunningham. And that's where that three-point percentage concerns me. Will they have consistent enough shooting to outlast those games in the playoffs where they are struggling to get Cade easy looks? And we just saw Sunday evening. They lost versus the Miami Heat, got stomped by the Miami Heat. And this was a team that beat the Detroit Pistons at their own game. They got out in transition, they out hustled the Pistons, and they had a much better collection of scoring depth. And when you think about the fact that the Miami Heat, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Charlotte Hornets are all teams that could potentially face them in the first round, this is going to be a trend to follow. How does the Detroit Pistons play against teams with better scoring depth than they have? These are all teams with strong scoring options from their starting lineups. And you can't even sleep on the Atlanta Hawks either, who score in bunches on a collective as a collective unit. All of these teams are top 15 in points per game. Detroit is 10th, and they are ahead of Charlotte and Philly, but all those teams are in the mix. So, in a nutshell, I still believe, I'm going to roll with my pick. I still believe that we get a New York Knicks and Detroit Pistons Eastern Conference Finals. I have the faith that Detroit can muck the game up enough to where they kind of squeeze into the late round of the playoffs. But the Pistons will find themselves on the ropes because they don't have consistent secondary perimeter scoring. That will be the thing that prevents them from seeing their championship dreams come to fruition this season. But that brings me to the Boston Celtics, who I dub the prototype. So the Pistons were the prize fighter and the Celtics are the prototype because they nearly have the total package / ideal roster, whatever term you want to use, for today's style of basketball. They are a shoot first team. We know this from the jump, aka Missoula ball. They are 9th in 3-point percentage. So not only do they get them up, but they are a team that is generally efficient when they shoot, 36.3% on the season. They also have defensive versatility. They have the 6th best defense in the league, which is not at all bad for a team that had us nervous after losing guys like Drew Holiday, Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis, very important pieces to what the Celtics have established defensively the last several seasons. They also have 2 superstar caliber players who are 3-level scorers, and they drafted them. They never had to acquire them through free agency, never had to trade for them. They were drafted in back-to-back years. Absolutely blessed. Jayson Tatum in 2017, and then the year before that, Jaylen Brown in 2016. And these are 2 players that were patiently able to grow from role players to the centerpieces we know them as today. Let's not forget, this was around the time where they were in that Isaiah Thomas era of the Celtics. So there was a lot going on. Jaylen Brown was really just asked to be another defensive guy, find his buckets within the flow of the offense. Once that turned into the Kyrie Irving Boston Celtics, and then Gordon Hayward was in the fray, and obviously you bring in Jayson Tatum, and you have a lot of great options and depth offensively and defensively. Jayson Tatum was playing a role. Yes, he was the 3rd pick in the draft. Yes, we knew that he had the potential to be the next great wing scorer in the NBA. But Jayson Tatum had to play a role. He was averaging 13 points, 15 points his first couple seasons in the league. But it wasn't until that Kyrie Irving situation moved on, the Kemba Walker situation didn't really work out. Gordon Hayward was going through the injury storm. And it just presented that opportunity for both Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown to develop as the main centerpieces for the Celtics. And I think those years, staying locked in on a role, taught them how to mature into the NBA game and find their way into the NBA game and not force being the go-to guy. They were able to be groomed and learn how to play the game the right way. And that is why you see the players that we see today. These are both guys that know how to pass when the shot isn't falling, how to stay impactful on both ends of the floor when their shot isn't falling. They have been incredible for the Boston Celtics. Those 2 draft picks have been absolute chef's kiss. And of course, that's a credit to the leadership from top to bottom. It started out with Danny Ainge, was eventually passed on to Brad Stevens, who formerly coached this team but has done an excellent job in a front office role. And now they have Joe Mazzulla, who's this perfect blend of calm and crazy. He really ensures that his team is focused on winning and learning from their losses. He's never too high, never too low, and the players follow his lead. And I think that goes a really long way when you have a coach like that, and then you have 2 mature leaders in Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And of course, to flesh out that roster, they drafted and acquired culture fits in Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Nehemias Queta, Ugo Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, Baylor Shireman, Sam Hauser. All of these players either specialize in defense, shooting, or both. A guy like Derek White, combo guard that they traded from San Antonio. You got Peyton Pritchard, who once upon a time, yes, he was drafted there, but he wanted a trade because he didn't see himself fitting long-term with the Boston Celtics, didn't like his role, getting limited minutes, but eventually he stayed the course and he developed into a great six-man, great spark plug for this team. Played a lot of starting minutes this season. They groomed Nehemias Queta, who came from the Sacramento Kings, was in the G League for a lot of time, found his way in Boston, did a lot of the dirty work responsibilities for this team, and boom, has been gotten really his first opportunity in the NBA as a starter with this Celtics team because he just waited his turn. Ugo Gonzalez was drafted this year. Great young defender for that team. Jordan Walsh has been huge for them, finally getting some minutes to show what he can do on defense. Baylor Shireman and Sam Hauser are great shooters. They fit what the Boston Celtics are trying to do. And they have successfully put themselves in a comfortable position for Jayson Tatum's return this season. A lot of people went into this season believing that the Boston Celtics were going to have a gap year. But I was one of the people that said, I don't think that's the case. Not only do I think that it's not the wisest decision, I think the Boston Celtics are actually still a good basketball team. Didn't think they'd be second in the East good, but definitely envisioned them in that 4, 5, 6 range, and they even went past my expectations. And this is a team that had a slow start. They were 4-6 in their first 10 games, but over the next month, they went 15-6 and just completely turned it around and went all the way up to second in the East, where they've been able to sit tight for most of the season. Again, that's a credit to their leadership and Joe Mazzulla, keeping his team composed, keeping them with the big goal in mind, their competitive spirit, Jaylen Brown's leadership among the players, what's going on court, and his stellar play, having a career year this season. But now Jayson Tatum's back, and it really unlocks their potential for the playoffs as he's really returned at the perfect time. And let's be real, Jayson Tatum has looked good in these first 2 games that he's played. Most of it has looked like shooting rust for the most part, but he was comfortable sliding his feet on defense, crashing the offensive and defensive glass, making smart passes. These were excellent signs for somebody who ruptured their Achilles. Regardless if you thought whether or not Jayson Tatum should have came back, I was of the notion that he should stay out and just run it back next season. But he returned at the perfect time. He listened to his body, he stuck to his goal, and now the Celtics are in great position to do something special this year when it didn't look like that was going to happen early on in the season. He gets a month of regular season basketball before the playoffs start and the intensity rises a little bit. Now, within all those good things I have to say about the Celtics, the only kryptonite I can think of with this team is missed shots and their youth. We all know the saying, shooters miss. Hence why Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown's half-court scoring means so much to this team. Sam Hauser is a great three-point shooter. You're going to close out on him 10 times out of 10. But he has been on and off this season. There are games where I've seen him shoot 6 or 7 from 3, and then the next game he's 0 for 9, 0 for 4. Is he going to be consistent enough to help this team get to where they want to be? Jayson Tatum, this is a guy that was already jump shot heavy pre-injury. How will the ramp up from the regular season to the playoffs affect his jump shot? Or will it even affect his jump shot? Maybe it won't affect his jump shot, but maybe it'll affect his decision to attack the paint more. I'm interested in seeing that. And of course, with the youth, opportunity knocks for Nehemias Queta, Baylor Shireman, Ugo Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, Luka Garza, barring a Nikola Vucevic inconsistent performance or injury. I know he's going to be out the next month with the thumb injury or finger injury. Those young guys are going to have to translate their value to the playoffs, and these are all guys that haven't had a lot of playoff minutes in their NBA careers. The good thing is Nehemias Queta is a good dirty work big. I think he's the best fit with the starters. This is a solid matchup you can put against other Eastern Conference bigs like Karl Anthony Towns, Bam Adebayo, Joel Embiid, Evan Mobley. Nikola Vucevic, he can fit with the starters, but I think he fits best with the second unit as a floor spacer. Lines up with that Mazzulla ball as a stretch four. But this is a guy that I've noticed as high as I was on this trade, Nikola Vucevic plays with a very short leash on this team. He only has a few mistakes in him before his rhythm is just completely shot. Because the Celtics, they get up the threes at such a frequent rate that by the time Nikola Vucevic comes off a screen and seals a mismatch inside the paint, somebody on the Celtics is shooting a three. So they probably didn't even see how open he was or the mismatch he had in the paint. And even when he gets the ball, if he misses the layup or the hook shot, whatever it is, now he's hard on himself because I'm probably not going to get that ball again. I have to take advantage of the looks that I do get. And I've said this all year. Nikola Vucevic is a old school big. He has to be engaged early. And I'm not saying pick and rolls. I'm not saying sitting in the corner waiting for a catch and shoot three. You have to get him the ball in the post. That is how he gets his rhythm. You have to know your personnel, KYP, and know your teammates, how they like the ball, what gets them in rhythm. And there have been times where I've watched the Boston Celtics and Nikola Vucevic doesn't even turn his body on a slip screen because he just doesn't expect to get the ball. And I've seen the Celtics get a few turnovers because of that. If Nikola Vucevic is going to be a valuable asset to the Boston Celtics, they have to find a way to engage him early. And they don't always do that, which I don't blame them for because of the way their offense is, but that's something you have to pay attention to. Luka Garza, very similar to Nikola Vucevic as a stretch big, but of course he's had more experience with this Celtics roster this season. So it'll be interesting to see what the center depth looks like. It'll be interesting to see how the youthful guys respond to the playoffs and what the shooting consistency is going to look like from the Boston Celtics, which hasn't been great. And they can shoot better, which is a scary sign. If they turn it on in the playoffs, it's going to get very scary. And that's why, in a nutshell, I there's something in me. I can't put my finger on it, but there's just something in me telling me to pump the brakes on the Boston Celtics. Pump the brakes on the Celtics are the new favorite talk, because I fully understand the sentiment. It is not a wrong assessment, but I do think it's just a little bit disrespectful to the New York Knicks, who match up very well against that team, and the Detroit Pistons, who have given them some good fights this season. If I'm honest, I've already been fiending for a Pistons Celtics Eastern Conference Finals next season. That's what I was really hanging my hat on. But it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they found a way to make it work this season and have a championship run. I would actually love to see that storyline. It would be amazing. But I just believe that it's better for them to go all in 100% next season. Let those young guys learn what the playoffs are like, get knocked down, but come back next year as the Eastern Conference favorite. That's what I really lean toward for the Boston Celtics. But during a season where the Eastern Conference feels wide open, the Celtics can very well crush the dreams of all the other teams this season. Only time will tell. Moving on to the New York Knicks, I have dubbed them the chosen one. Yes, the New York Knicks are the chosen one because on paper, they have been gifted an Eastern Conference championship this season. They don't have to worry about the Indiana Pacers, who beat them in the 2024 semifinals and last season's Eastern Conference Finals. The Pistons are without a sidekick for Cade Cunningham, although they are 0-3 versus Detroit this season. The Celtics, they just beat them in the semifinals last season. They have the defense to match up with that team. The Cavaliers, they are 2-1 against the Cleveland Cavaliers this season, and the Cavs are a team who just hasn't shown they can get over the hump just yet. So if we're checking boxes, the Knicks have an advantage here. Some of us criticize them for giving up on Tom Thibodeau last season, but they have improved. Last season, they were the 5th best offense, and they had the 14th best defense. This year, they are 3rd in offense, and they are 7th in defense. And once upon a time, you question their defense, even with their talent like OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, but they figured it out this year. And I think the biggest thing that they fixed is their depth. That was the biggest thing heading into the offseason. How can the New York Knicks deepen their rotations? Their offensive dexterity hasn't changed all that much, but what has changed is their overall depth. They brought in Jordan Clarkson. Tyler Kolek played in some big games this year. They really love that kid, Mohamed Diawara. He's a nice 3-and-D player for them. Landry Shamet has been an elite shooter for them. And they got Jose Alvarado, the hometown kid, at the trade deadline, bringing them incredible energy. All of these players I named have shown noticeable impact throughout the course of the season. And I'm going as far as to say that if the New York Knicks are serious about winning a championship this season, they will find a way to present impactful opportunities for all of those guys throughout the playoffs. That's the biggest thing I want to see from them this season. Jordan Clarkson has been getting a lot of DNPs lately, but this is a scoring spark that is perfect for the NBA playoffs. Tyler Kolek is a secondary ball handler who embodies next man up. We've seen that in the NBA Cup. We've seen that throughout the course of the season, where he looks most comfortable when Jalen Brunson is struggling or when somebody else can't get a shot off. Mohamed Diawara, this is a reliable 3-and-D wing. Great size at 6'9". He's also a guy shooting 41% from three this year. He's going to come in handy this playoffs. Landry Shamet, another guy shooting 41% from three-point range. He's played himself into the rotation again with elite shooting. Jose Alvarado, probably the most impactful trade of the deadline. Very hard to leave him off the floor because he gets those sneaky GTA signature steals. He gets loose balls, 50-50 balls. He hits threes. He can even get his way into the lane sometimes. He just lives for those moments. He's a fearless defender, and he lives for the big plays. You always want a guy alongside you in the heat of the battle like that. And the thing that makes OKC scary is that they believe in their players more than they believe in narratives. And I think that's been something that the New York Knicks have struggled with. They tend to lean towards those narratives a little bit. And that's why I think when it comes to OKC, this is why their role players can sit 5 straight games and suddenly be impactful on the 6th one because they believe in their guys. The New York Knicks kind of fall into narratives. Oh, maybe Cat's too soft, or maybe Mikal Bridges' shot selection is too inconsistent, or maybe the New York Knicks have too many guards. We don't want to play that many small players, so we'll stick to our 7-8 man rotation. You got to believe in those guys for what they can do. Yes, Jordan Clarkson may not be a crazy defender. He may not have that much impact anywhere else. But when he's on scoring the basketball, when you're missing 10 straight jumpers, you have a guy that's going to help you get a spark, who's going to live for those moments and have no conscience and shoot the ball with confidence. I want to see the New York Knicks really pull into those X factors this year and play with those wild cards that they got on their team. You have them for a reason. The playoffs are gonna provide an opportunity for you to play them. But when it comes to the New York Knicks, I just can't help but wonder if they are serious enough to win the East. Are the New York Knicks serious enough to win the East? They may be the chosen one, but do they have it in them? And I think what's funny is that there's this drug of the Madison Square Garden, the mecca of basketball, the iconic arena is a drug. The benefit is that the New York Knicks energy is always going to be on 120. But the side effects is that it creates 70% energy for road games, and their opponents also get boosted energy. Now, in all seriousness, the New York Knicks this season are 23-9 at home, and they are 17-15 on the road. Once upon a time earlier in the season, they had a losing record on the road. And I heard Gilbert Arenas say this. We know that players live for games in MSG, especially playoff games. We saw what the Pacers did last season. And every other arena doesn't quite live up to the lore that is Madison Square Garden. Maybe Boston has an arena like that. But at the end of the day, you end up yearning for that back home, which is where the withdrawal symptoms come in. You don't give your best effort on the road, that those side effects kick in, those withdrawals kick in, and you end up missing good old MSG. You need that dosage because you know that's where you play your best basketball. And the New York Knicks, if they're seriously trying to win the East, they have to treat every game the same. And that's what champions do. They play every game the same. There are still other issues that they have to monitor. Again, Mikal Bridges' shot selection, Cat foul trouble, offense and defense. He gets called for those hooks on offense and he gets caught with his hand in the cookie jar a lot on defense. Josh Hart, this is a guy that I'm wondering, can he be impactful when his transition opportunities are limited? I thought he wasn't that great versus the Indiana Pacers last season because they were getting in transition a lot, and it forced him to do a lot of decision making in the half court that just wasn't suitable for his game. And that brings me to the last point. Who's going to step up when Jalen Brunson gets cold? And again, is it going to be one of those X factors, or are some of these guys going to step up and find a way to contribute offensively in the half court when their star is struggling? That's why they just lost to an OKC team. They did a lot of things right versus OKC. Really good defense. But if Jalen Brunson makes a couple more shots, they probably win that game. If somebody else makes a couple big plays, they probably win that game. They're going to have to answer those questions in the playoffs as well. So the challenge remains. Barring injury, there is no excuse for the New York Knicks to not have a deep playoff run this year. But as we know, nothing is guaranteed. I will say though, I finally got that feeling in my chest. The same one I got for Denver before the 2022-23 season. The same one I got before Boston 2023-24 run. I got that same feeling in my chest for the New York Knicks during that win versus Houston in MSG a couple weeks ago. The Knicks have what it takes, but they just can't get in their own way. And I've been guilty of that in my own life. I'm not just going to be the podcaster that tries to sit up here and tell NBA players that are much more talented and taller than I what to do in their jobs. But I'm rooting for the Knicks to do what they haven't been able to do since I was just under 1 year old. 1 year old. They have all the tools. I want to see it happen this year because I got that feeling that I haven't gotten the past few seasons. The New York Knicks got it. They are the chosen one. But now it's time to put in the work and make it happen. And last but certainly not the least of the Fantastic Four, we end with the underdog, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Because this is the team that nobody wants to take serious. They made the playoffs. I want you to hear this. Donovan Mitchell has made the playoffs every season of his NBA career, but he hasn't been past the second round. Since 2012, James Harden hasn't been past the conference finals. And of course, this is the player that's also been heavily criticized for his elimination game collapses. Most notably the ones that we saw in 2017 versus San Antonio Spurs, 2022, 2023, 2025. There's been some concern there. You look back at Jared Allen, 2023, the lights were brighter than I expected after their embarrassing defeat against the New York Knicks in the first round. And as an organization, the Cavs just haven't been past the semifinals since 2018. And who was on that roster? LeBron James. But I would argue that the difference between the previous Cavs teams and this one is playmaking depth. Last year in the playoffs, they were dealing with Darius Garland's injury. Ty Jerome wasn't playing to his standards, and they had just zero secondary shot creation. But this season, they have brought in James Harden. They have Dennis Schroeder off the bench, and they have plenty of X factors. Sam Merrill, more of a catch and shoot guy, but still somebody that has been in the fray of these Cavaliers runs and can make an impact with his shooting. Jalen Tyson has stepped up huge for this team. Dean Wade has been great as a forward for this team. Keon Ellis has been a scrappy 3-and-D presence for this team. Craig Porter Jr. has played some good games. Even Naquan Tomlin has been really good. Yes, some of these guys were on previous Cleveland Cavaliers teams, but man, the pick and roll variety that they have with Harden now is just insane. All of these guys can be dangerous on a team with James Harden, Donovan Mitchell. Because Donovan Mitchell, first off, he just has a secondary scorer in James Harden now, something that he's never had in his NBA career. And the Cavs, their ability to get open looks with driving kicks, inverted pick and rolls, traditional pick and rolls, short rolls, it just reminds me of NBA 2K when I watch them play. Any variation of a pick and roll is going to be an easy assist. That is how scary the Cleveland Cavaliers are offensively. And when I watch them play, I just believe wholeheartedly that their scoring opportunities are endless. Or are they? because there are some potential limitations with the Cavaliers. I've always said Donovan Mitchell, one of his biggest kryptonites is falling in love with the three-point shot. If you can get him to continuously take off the dribble threes, chances are, yeah, he's going to make a lot of them, but he's also going to miss a lot of them. And if you can make sure that he's missing them, do your best to go over screens, or honestly, you actually go under the screen to force him to take those shots, see if you can get a last-minute contest and make those shots harder on him. We've seen that all throughout Utah series and a couple Cavs series. Evan Mobley isn't always aggressive for 48 minutes. I don't think Evan Mobley always realizes how good he can be. He takes his foot off the gas sometimes, and I think we just saw that on Sunday afternoon versus the Celtics. He had a great first quarter. He saw Nemias Queta and saw food. This is a less experienced dude compared to me. Like, I can go to work. He was getting to the jump hook. He knocked down the three. Obviously great in the pick and roll. He was killing, and then it just faded out a little bit. James Harden does the same things. He can get a little too passive sometimes. And we know that Donovan Mitchell, regardless of how a game goes, he's going to give his 110% effort. But I think James Harden or Evan Mobley or both of those guys need to be able to match the effort that Donovan Mitchell is going to bring if they really want to get over the hump. And another weakness from the Cleveland Cavaliers is the rebounding from Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. I've been big on this the last couple seasons now. Rebounding is so imperative for Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley because they are lighter bigs. They're not necessarily strong bigs. So they get pushed around. The rebounding just doesn't always look the way that it should. And I actually did the numbers so you don't have to. This year, the Cleveland Cavaliers are 6-9 when Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are out-rebounded by the opposing team's starting power forward and or center. But they are 16-3 when they out-rebound the opposing starting power forward and or center. And that shows you that controlling the glass still matters. The Cleveland Cavaliers are far superior when those guys are doing the dirty work and they're snagging those rebounds. And it's something that Charles Barkley mentioned during the halftime show of Sunday afternoon's game versus Boston. Before they went to commercial break, he said, "Come on, Cleveland, show some pride." And then I sat with that and I was like, that's probably it. That just seems to be a general theme for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Show some pride. And I think that's why people have doubts with this team. And again, bringing somebody like James Harden to that mix where your franchise already has struggled the last few seasons to create some memorable playoff runs and progression and championship level execution, you bring in a guy that has been accused of being a quitter by the casual fan. Don't get me wrong, the Cleveland Cavaliers are really good. Really good. I want it for them. But they have to play with that pride, play with that chip on their shoulder if they want to overcome a very competitive Eastern Conference. I'm real excited to see how the Eastern Conference playoffs shape up, especially because it might be even more entertaining than the West playoffs. And the leading the way is the Fantastic Four. All four teams have excellent opportunities to get over the hump and show what they can do. But they all have some weaknesses that leave me just a little bit concerned. I'll leave you with something that my grandma always used to tell me and my cousins and my siblings growing up. Somebody has to lose. Only one of these teams is going to hold the trophy. And the team that comes out on top is going to be the team that is able to adjust throughout the playoffs and overcome their weaknesses and even some of their moments of self-sabotage to hold the trophy that they so desperately want. We've evaluated the championship hopes between the Fantastic Four, but what about the sleeper, lower-seeded teams? For today's Jab Step, we're not touching on the play-in conversation for time's sake, but we definitely got to talk about teams 5 through 7. The Toronto Raptors, the Orlando Magic, and the Miami Heat. And just like last week, I'll be tackling this segment by looking ahead at the potential playoff matchups we'll see as of today's recording, tipping it off with the second-seeded Celtics versus the 7th-seeded Miami Heat. Of course, this has the potential to be a first round matchup. These franchises have met in the playoffs 7 times between 2010 and 2025. So within the past 16 seasons, nearly half of the postseasons featured a Heat versus Celtics series at some point. And in these 7 series, Miami has the upper hand, going 4-3. So it's a close series either way. Now, the Celtics are 3-0 versus the Miami Heat this season. Game 1 featured a 129-116 victory. Game 2 featured a 119-114 victory. And this is the one game where both teams were fully healthy. Obviously, the Celtics without Jayson Tatum coming back from injury, but from what they presented that season, both teams were fully healthy. And then Game 3 was a 98-96 Celtics victory. So the funny thing about a lot of these scores is that they've been generally either high scoring or close. And we've seen a lot of variety, high scoring, close games, but even lower scoring games. So this should be a really good series. And I think the reason why that is because the Miami Heat, they have the offense to go shot for shot with the Boston Celtics. This team has been first in pace pretty much all season long. They're second in points per game, one of only 2 teams to average over 120 points per game, the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets. And they nearly have the exact 3-point percentage as the Boston Celtics. So this team is a lot closer, at least offensively, to the Boston Celtics and statistically than we would probably imagine. The Miami Heat, they thrive off their variety of scoring options that we mentioned last week. Tyler Hero, Norman Powell, Bam Adebayo, Andrew Wiggins, Jaime Jaquez, Pelle Larsson. They do a lot as a unit. And the thing about the Miami Heat is that they are dead last in pick and roll frequency. Remember, pick and roll scoring has been everything the last decade now. But the Miami Heat play straight up isolation, instinctual hoops. They ISO, they pass, they cut, they drive and kick. Not a lot of pick and roll. And as I'm on the subject, I really believe that what the Miami Heat are doing this season and what the Atlanta Hawks are doing this season, that is the future of basketball. There was an interview where Donovan Mitchell mentioned that he thinks the game is going to get even faster. And when I watch the Miami Heat and when I watch the Atlanta Hawks, I think that's what the game is going to look like. So the Miami Heat are really playing some transcendent hoops, if you will. And it's not all offense. They're 4th in defense, they're 7th in steals, and they're 4th in points off turnovers. They always have a rim protector in Bam Adebayo or Kel Ware, no matter what lineup they play. They can always run 5 out because both of those guys are able to stretch the floor. And they have at least one point of attack defender in Davion Mitchell. They have a wing defender in Andrew Wiggins, and of course, one of those rim protectors. So they cover all areas of the floor. It's just a matter of their teammates following what they do defensively. So it's a solid mix of players that can set the tone on offense and defense. This isn't a great team, but a very impressive team. I think the biggest thing with the Miami Heat, funny enough, they're missing a Jayson Tatum or a Jaylen Brown. They're missing a Cade Cunningham. They're missing a Jalen Brunson. They're missing a Donovan Mitchell. Players that that are on the teams of the Fantastic Four. And that's what separates them from being a true contender. And the funniest thing with the Miami Heat is that they actually split the season series with the other 3 teams in the Fantastic Four. So obviously, they haven't won versus the Boston Celtics, but they split the season series versus the New York Knicks, versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, versus the Detroit Pistons. And I think the difference is that the Boston Celtics have too much defensive versatility for the Heat style of play to be sustainable. That was always my biggest question. The Heat are playing some really fun, entertaining, and unique basketball. But is it sustainable? And it makes me wonder if Eric Spoelstra, knowing the genius and the kind of mind games that the Miami Heat like to play a lot of times, is he going to reintroduce their pick and roll game at some point during the playoffs? And that might serve as a wild card versus any other team. But against a team that they've seen a lot over the last few years in the Boston Celtics, a team that knows them up and down, I'm not sure if the Heat have a wild card in them to throw the Celtics off balance. At the end of the day, this is a team where when their offensive firepower is on and they're hustling on defense, they are dangerous. But their offense might not be as sustainable with that defense that the Celtics have been able to play. This is a team that should give Boston a decent first round fight, but I'd be very surprised if they were able to upset this team. I would pick Celtics in 5, maybe 6 if I lean further into my optimistic spirit. But like I said, I just think it's going to come down to whether or not the Heat's offense is sustainable enough. And even then, are you ready to guard Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown for a playoff series? It's a lot of teams aren't going to be able to beat that. So I do have the Celtics in 5 at the absolute quickest, but it might go 6 just because of the Miami Heat's offensive dexterity, being able to hang in there and go shot for shot with the Celtics Missoula ball. On to the 3-seeded Knicks versus the 6-seeded Magic. This is actually a very balanced first round series, and it's a good opening challenge for both teams because I think both teams wouldn't mind a slower game. And they actually split their season series 2 games apiece. In game 1, we saw healthy rosters, 124-107 Magic. Obviously, Mo Wagner wasn't coming back from his injury yet, so again, much like what I said before, as what they presented for that season, it was a healthy game. In game 2, there was no OG Anunoby and no Paolo Banchero. Still, the Magic won 133-121. Game 3, there was no Cat. The Knicks still found a way to win 106-100. And then in game 4, there was no Miles McBride and no Franz Wagner. And the Knicks still won 132-120. So it's been a toss-up either way. Injuries, no injuries, they've split the season. And if it's anything like their regular season meetings, this playoff run should be a competitive series if both teams are fully loaded. Again, Franz Wagner has had some injuries. He's been out. They're still waiting on him to come back. Anthony Black has been dealing with some things. It's very important that the Magic are fully loaded if they really want to compete with the New York Knicks. And I noticed some interesting trends with both of these teams. Now, the Magic and the New York Knicks give up the least second chance points. They are the 2 teams that are the absolute best at giving up the least second chance points. And when I think about these 2 teams in a series against each other, this means that defensive rebounding is everything for the Orlando Magic. And that's going to be hard because the Knicks are 6th in offensive rebounds per game. So it's something to watch as the Magic are a very average rebounding team in general. And we know that Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson are an absolute handful on the glass, especially when they're out there at the same time. The Magic have to have their defensive rebounding as a point of emphasis in this series. Additionally, both teams nearly average the same amount of fouls per game. So I can envision this being a scrappy series. Desmond Bane is quite the instigator. It's well documented. Paolo Banchero has a mean streak. The New York Knicks play gritty basketball. It's going to be physical and it's going to be gritty, and I like that. Perfect for the playoffs. But speaking of some physicality, it makes me wonder, how does Jalen Brunson handle defensive guards like Jalen Suggs and Javon Carter? Jalen Brunson hasn't done well against teams that have physical defenders or bigger defenders, like the Detroit Pistons, like the Oklahoma City Thunder. Jalen Suggs is a bigger guard. Javon Carter is more Jalen Brunson's size, but somebody that plays intense defense. And I think on a basic level, I think from a courtside perspective, Jalen Brunson really just has to not shy away from the physicality, which is right up his alley with how he plays the game, drawing contact, drawing fouls. He's got to get those guys in foul trouble early so they lighten their pressure, and then he's able to have a more relaxed offensive performance in a playoff series. That's going to be, I'd be willing to bet that's his approach in a potential series with the Orlando Magic, getting those guys in foul trouble and then being able to cook as the game progresses. But the Magic do have a lot of length, and they do have some interesting offensive lineups that they play out there. And in fact, the Magic remind me a little bit of the Oklahoma City Thunder because this is a team that can get scary when they're hot from 3. It doesn't happen as much as you would like, but when they get hot, it gets scary. And I've said this before, but the Magic are just another one of those teams that cold shooting is going to ensure that their season ends early. They have to be able to knock down shots. Desmond Bane can't do it by himself. They have to be, guys like Anthony Black have to be hitting. Those guards have to be hitting. And they show flashes, but as a unit, not the most consistent. We just went over that. They're worse than the Detroit Pistons. So that's going to be tough against a team like the Knicks, who, when they're rolling, can score in bunches. Now, if I want to stir the pot, if the Magic are healthy, I want to say Knicks in 7. As a fan of the game, I want to say Knicks in 7. Because again, the Magic have a lot of length to play against the New York Knicks, and that can be a sneaky cheat code. Both of these teams have top 10 defenses, strong versatility and size across the perimeter and the wings. The Magic, they lean heavily on their 3 best players, Paolo Banchero, Desmond Bane, Franz Wagner. You can even add Anthony Black to that list with the way he's been able to rise this season. The Knicks, they also get a majority of their production from their starters. These teams mirror each other a lot. And they might be closer than their records show. But again, what I think prevents Orlando from extending this series is 3-point shooting struggles and poor shot selection. Very intrigued to see how Paolo Banchero handles this playoff series. We know that last year he settled for a lot of mid-range jump shots versus the Celtics of all teams, and it just killed their offense because he wasn't able to knock them down. He has to look to punish the paint first, especially versus a team like New York where foul trouble is a weakness of theirs. The Magic were dead last in assists per game last year with 23. This year they've jumped to 14th with 26.5. So if they can generate that improved ball movement, most notably thanks to the rise of Anthony Black and the acquisition of Desmond Bane, their offense should look better in a playoff environment. But realistically, I just still have the Knicks in 5, maybe 6. But the fan in me hopes for a competitive 7-game series because these teams mirror each other pretty well. It would be a good first-round matchup for both teams. And then lastly, we have the 4-seeded Cavaliers and the 5-seeded Toronto Raptors. This is a very, very interesting matchup. And funny enough, throughout the year, I thought the Knicks or the Celtics would be more parallel playoff matchups for the Raptors. But they're actually 0-7 versus those teams combined this season. And they're 3-0 versus the Cavaliers. So maybe this is working out for the best. And there's no better test for the Raptors, 8th best defense, than guarding the 5th best offense, Cleveland Cavaliers, for a playoff series. The Toronto Raptors defense, their communication is strong. They really wreak havoc with their rotations. They know how to scramble and put pressure on the offense to make quick decisions or even rush decisions. And they have the ultimate cheat code in Scotty Barnes being a Defensive Player of the Year candidate and Colin Murray Boyles, who even as a rookie are just, these are 2 guys that can guard multiple positions. Absolute cheat code. And not only is their defense strong, but again, they have that offensive flexibility to go with it. You have Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, and Emmanuel Quickley all averaging over 17 points per game this season. A lot of that there's been injuries in the mix of there, but case in point, they have the offensive talent to get buckets. Another guy that not a lot of people are talking about, Sandro Mamukelashvili. He's been a great bright spot off the bench for this team. 11 points on 52, 38, 76 splits, which is not bad at all. I think he's really found a home here in Toronto, which has been great to see. They got Jamal Shed, who's a reliable floor general off the bench. Not the most efficient shooter as a smaller guard, but they see him as a leader on that team on both ends of the floor, and they love what he brings to the game impact-wise. Jacoby Walter is a 3-and-D type of player who they really love over there. I really think he was able to outplay Ochai Agbaji, so he won that position battle, so to speak, and he's emerged as an important piece for that team and fits their defensive-minded culture. This isn't a perfect offensive team. They're only 18th in offense despite the flashes that they show, and it does make sense because they don't have the greatest spot-up shooting. And outside of Brandon Ingram and Emmanuel Quickley, there isn't a lot of... The structure can look a little weird at times, and I'll get to that a little bit later, but they do have the pieces that have put them in position to be a playoff team, and a playoff team that shouldn't be taken lightly. They are 4th in assists per game, 28.9. This shows that the ball still has been able to move despite introducing a half-court scorer like Brandon Ingram to their roster. Again, we're reaching the age of basketball where a lot of GMs and a lot of fans, They just don't like the idea of their favorite teams acquiring half-court scores like Brandon Ingram because of fear of them becoming a ball stopper. But the Raptors have been able to show, hey, we got a guy like that and we're still moving the rock. It's possible if you are able to manage it correctly and you have personnel that is unselfish and able to create opportunities for each other. And a big thing that I noticed about the Raptors as well that I really want to highlight is that they like to run these sets where they put guards or wings in the dunker spot. So if they make that pass in there and the defense collapses, there is somebody there that is smart enough and agile enough to make a play out of a tight situation and make a smart pass to a shooter. I noticed that more specifically in their road game versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. That really helped them win that game. They got a lot of those opportunities, and I think that's one of the reasons why they have such great ball movement, because they don't always put their bigs in the dunker spot. They put their guards and wings in the dunker spot and allow them to play make from there. And I think that's really interesting. Now, because of the injury to Jakob Poeltl for most of the season, they ran a lot of small ball this season, and that saw Colin Murray-Boyles emerge as a starter for this team. And this is a kid that's already drawn comparisons to Draymond Green just on how impactful he is on defense while having a respectable three-point shot at 35%. He has immense versatility. He can legitimately guard 1 through 5. He's amazing on the defensive end. But what I fear in a potential playoff series versus the Cleveland Cavaliers is that small ball may not work as well versus the Cavaliers bigs. And I mentioned the importance of the Cavaliers rebounding. If they can punish the glass versus a team like the Toronto Raptors, it's going to be very hard for the Raptors to win a playoff series and make an upset versus this team. Although a healthy Jakob Poeltl, a 7-footer, he can increase their chances of success. So if he's healthy and he's doing his job on the box outs, things of that nature, the Raptors might have a better chance working in those small ball lineups than I think. Or maybe even this, the small ball might just be best for those rotations against a strong Cavs offense. You know, a team that's going to move the ball and showcase a lot of offensive dexterity. Maybe the small ball is what's best when that defense scrambles and they rotate and wreak havoc. So we'll see how that goes. That'll be something that I'm monitoring as well. Now, the biggest thing I dread for the Toronto Raptors, though, is that they tend to have strong starts but slow finishes. And this really concerns me. This team is 28th in fourth quarter points per game, and they are 20th in second half points per game. Now, clearly the Toronto Raptors would not be a playoff team if they couldn't finish games, but this matters a lot more as they are set to face the best of the best in the playoffs. And it tells me that maybe their bench could use some extra scoring, maybe a little less utility players, but maybe an extra bench scorer, or maybe just the way they stagger their rotations. I know there's been games versus the San Antonio Spurs where Brandon Ingram sits going into the fourth quarter and they lose all the momentum that they built in the third quarter and just lose the game. 2 games versus the Minnesota Timberwolves where they are in it for most of the game or maybe the first half, but that second half just crumbles. They just have to find a way to stay in the games for 48 minutes and not just the first half. And especially against the Cavaliers, who, as quick as a hiccup, can go crazy on offense when those shots start falling. So this is going to be another great test between a great offense and a great defense. And I'm going to pick the Cavaliers in 5, maybe 6. I just don't think the Toronto Raptors have enough offense to match Cleveland for 48 minutes, lest the Cavs hit the same dry spells we've seen from them throughout the season. Maybe the Raptors have a better chance, but just as the first round matchup is, I do have the Cavaliers taking this series, but I would love to see an excellent fight from the Toronto Raptors. We all know that defense wins championships, but only if you supplement it with well-timed buckets. And as much as I love the Raptors, I love what they've been doing this season, it's hard not to envision the Cavaliers with the edge here. Woo. I told you the East was crazy. I told you it was a charcuterie board of hoops, good and bad and ugly and pretty. And that's not even addressing the play-in surges that we might see from the Charlotte Hornets or the Philadelphia 76ers. So I guess we'll have to uncover that another day. But for now, let me know how you see the East playoffs shaping up in the comments or the socials at MidPostPod on Twitter if you're listening to the show. We've worked hard to get to our spot, but now we got to make it worth it. Make or miss. First up, something that came up earlier in the show. Make or miss. Jayson Tatum returns from Achilles injury in 10 months. I initially didn't want him to return this season, but Jayson Tatum just reminded me how important it is to listen to your body and not let anyone convince you that your goals are crazy. He had a goal. He said from the jump that I want to play as soon as I can. I want to come back next season and give the playoff push for my team. And that's exactly what he's doing. And not only did he come back as he hoped, but he's back with no minutes restriction and moving very well. As a player that exerts a lot of energy on defense, with his rebounding ability and taking contested jumpers off the dribble, I was very anxious to see if he trusted his leg, if he had that confidence to believe that he was healthy enough to do those things that the Celtics asked him to do. And he definitely did. I was very impressed with Jayson Tatum's return. I'm praying for continued health for Jayson and all the hoopers out there that might be going through a similar storm. The NBA is better when the stars are healthy, and it's good to see one of the brightest back in action playing good basketball for his team. Next, make or miss. The Miami Heat do kids night for Sunday's game versus the Detroit Pistons. I was able to catch the Miami Heat versus Pistons game, and on their telecast, they were doing the kids night. And many teams around the league, if you watch, do kids night. I know the Chicago Bulls have done it numerous times where they replace TV graphics with artwork drawn by kids. And the Miami Heat did a similar thing on Sunday, but they actually assigned various production roles to kids. One of the hosts was a younger girl, like grade school age maybe, that did a lot of the promotional segments with the team store and other ventures that the Miami Heat are affiliated with. There was another high school senior that announced the starting lineup on the broadcast and hosted the halftime show with the co-host. And there was a younger high school girl. She interviewed Caron Butler during halftime. And then really the star of the night was a college senior who joined the Heat's play-by-play legends, Eric Reed and John Crotty, and even filled in for Eric Reed and orchestrated the play-by-play for majority of the second quarter alongside John Crotty. So that was like really awesome to see. I was a multimedia student in college, so I had a soft spot for that night, and it took me back to my radio internship when I read sports news for the first time live on air. I was able to identify what those kids were experiencing. Like you could tell some of them, obviously the younger ones, had those jitters and didn't necessarily know how to respond when they did ask a question, or they had to work on diversifying their verbiage and not saying the same thing over again, but at the same time understanding that they're live on TV and they just have to go with their gut. Like it was awesome to witness that. I think it's great for the youth who are pursuing media, and more sports organizations I think should do this, especially now where it's a tough job market for media students, man. And when you get an opportunity like this, you're able to gain valuable experience and really confidence as you progress in your career. It's nothing like when you are on that stage and your heart is beaten, but you're confident in your abilities. And it's nothing like when you deliver a good segment or even just one line and you get a tap on the shoulder from the pros and they compliment your work, or they give you an encouraging word, or they say, hey, maybe you should try this next time. That'll work better when you do this, that, and the third. Like all of those mean the world. And multimedia, like I said, even in its endless avenues, it's already a tough industry to break into. Anytime you're able to get that hands-on experience outside of your primary endeavor, whether that's your schoolwork or maybe a passion project that you have or an internship, it's valuable and can potentially set you up for a career in the future, or at the very least, just develop your skills and show you those mistakes so you can work on them in your own time. So that was an absolute make for the Miami Heat. I would love to see that more across sports for sure. Make or miss, Trae Young makes his Wizards debut recently. I wasn't able to catch the game, but I was happy that Trae Young chose to play and did not shut himself down for the season. It's a reminder that yes, players want to play, no matter their team status. They want to play. He could have easily just said, oh, you guys are tanking. I'll sit back. We'll run it next year with AD and everybody. But no, even in March, Trae is like, I want to get out there with the young guys and get chemistry with them and get in front of these Wizards fans and show what I can do. He had some signature highlight plays, some no-look passes. He brought that energy to the crowd that they've been anxious to see. He looked comfortable and I think more at home as the primary playmaker again. even without key teammates like Alex Sarr and some of the other guys, it was a preview that defenses will be in trouble in pick and roll scenarios. If you focus on Trae, you leave the big man free for the roll. If you go under the screen and try to take away the big man and hug him, now Trae has an ISO with the mismatch. I can only imagine what that can look like with Alex Sarr and Anthony Davis. Trae Young was playing with the younger dudes. Imagine when he gets his stars back. And it showed that while the league gravitates to bigger guards and wings handling the ball and initiating, Trae Young is still among the best at reading the defenses and controlling a game. At the end of the day, skill matters. I don't care how tall you are, how short you are, skill matters. And if you have it up here in your brain and you have the skills tangibly, at the end of the day, you can be a valuable basketball player. And I do think Trae Young is going to be able to show that in Washington. Hopefully, they can get some get healthy and then get some wins down the line. So I thought that was a make. But then make or miss. Panic in Detroit. The Pistons at the time of this recording have lost 4 straight games. I have to categorize this as a miss. It's unfortunate that they've hit a losing streak at this point of the season, but I'd rather them experience this right now than literally go into the playoffs with a losing streak. They had a close game versus Cleveland where Cade didn't shoot the ball well. The San Antonio Spurs are literally one of the best teams in the league. The Brooklyn Nets, they went down to the wire with them, and Cade and Asar Thompson weren't even playing in that game. And then just on Sunday, the Heat came and just took their lunch money. I know it's not a good look, but you gotta, context is key. Those are, for the most part, some good teams. I can't say that I'm hitting the panic button just yet. This team has been on fire for most of the year. They've maintained that number 1 spot in the East most of the year. It makes sense that they finally hit a wall against teams that, like I said, for the most part, are really talented offensively. Bounce back versus Brooklyn, get your revenge tonight, and then keep Philly on the ropes Thursday. Stay the course. You got to go on to the next game. Don't fall for the noise. That's what championship teams do. So I'm not panicking in no way. Tough stretch for Detroit, especially with the playoffs on the horizon, but no panic whatsoever. Next game. Play on. Another 4-pack of fades today. 75%, 3 makes, 1 miss. You know that's what I like to hear. Hopefully we can keep up our hot streak next week, 1 shot at a time though. Before we end today's show, we got to highlight this week's mid-post player of the week. And I got a great one for you today. This guy was the total package in his heyday. I would say he was one of the more underappreciated scorers of his era for sure. A respectable defender and a passionate competitor. He flirted with 25-5 averages in his prime. A complete player just through and through. Real ones remember his Illinois roots, getting some of those MJ comparisons as a high school kid. But when I see him, I can't help but say, this brother was Kawhi Leonard before Kawhi Leonard. If you don't believe me, the tape is there. Today's mid-post player of the week goes to Findog himself, Michael Finley. Drafted to the Suns with the 21st pick in the 1995 draft, he was able to find his footing a little bit there. He finished 4th in Rookie of the Year voting, but in his sophomore season, he was involved in the trade that sent Jayson Kidd to Phoenix during the 96-97 season. And that trade worked out for both sides, as Finley was able to spend the next 9 seasons of his career where a lot of us know him the most, the Dallas Mavericks. By his 3rd year, he emerged as a 25-5 3-level scoring threat. And when I watched Michael Finley, he was really ahead of his time. Like I said, it's so similar to what you see from Kawhi Leonard today. He had this chiseled frame at 6'7", 215 pounds. He had the mid-range game, 1 dribble pull-up, 2 dribble pull-up, out of the triple threat, mid-post. He had a comfortable handle and sneaky athleticism. Like, I'm talking take the ball down the length of the court, get to the spot, and just extend over the defense like a trampoline appeared out of nowhere, just able to jump and extend over the defense and posterize people. He had the Jordan-esque ball fakes and the ability to palm the basketball and just get to wherever spot he wanted to get to on the floor. He even flirted with 35 to 37-ish 3-point percent averages. Again, that only got better as he aged. So even in the 90s and the early 2000s, where the 3-point shot wasn't as high volume as it is today, he was shooting them and he was efficient. This guy was an all-star in 2000 and 2001, back-to-back seasons. He was a large piece of the big three that Dallas was starting to establish with Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash, who, funny enough, would both emerge as all-stars themselves in 2002. And when I think about those years, just to this day, I had to go back and do my knowledge because I still was a younger kid, but I hate that those three guys could never overcome teams like the San Antonio Spurs and the Sacramento Kings in the playoffs. Again, this was the early 2000s. If it wasn't the Lakers and if it wasn't the Spurs, it was hard to get out of the West. I mean, that's what it was. You knew that it was going to be the San Antonio Spurs or the Los Angeles Lakers. Kobe Bryant would say it all the time. I would have had 8 rings if it wasn't for the San Antonio Spurs. And I'm sure Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and those guys feel the same way. If it wasn't for the Lakers, we'd have even more rings. That's just what it was. And I think the Dallas Mavericks, unfortunately, despite having great offensive teams that were so ahead of their time back then, they just couldn't get over the hump because they ran into better, well-rounded teams like the Spurs and the Lakers. And unfortunately, by the time Dallas did start to get over the hump, obviously making the NBA Finals in 2006, Steve Nash was already with the Phoenix Suns. He left in the 2004 offseason. And then Michael Finley, in the summer of 2005, he went to the San Antonio Spurs. Of course, he went to the team that found success. He accepted a key bench role there, and he started to regress once he got there, but he did have a key role before eventually retiring in 2010. Michael Finley wasn't the flashiest player, but he fit perfectly with the 2000s era of hoops. Just strong body, could score at all 3 levels, unselfish, played solid defense. I'm not sure why his name doesn't come up that much today. Maybe because he didn't have a lot of the accolades and a lot of the flashy stuff that would help his game shine brighter, but real ones know, man. Michael Finley was super nice and would easily be just as good, if not better, if he played in today's league. Not only was he able to shine in the stacked era of wing scorers, but he gets his well-deserved shine for this week's Mid-Post Player of the Week. And that brings us to the end of today's show. If you like this episode, please don't be shy and let me know how you enjoyed it. Honest reviews and ratings are always appreciated, and be sure to follow the socials at MidPostPod on Twitter, Instagram, at Desmond Powell _ on TikTok, so you stay connected with all announcements and social media clips and things of that nature on the social media channels. But in the meantime, I'll catch you in the post next week. Peace out and God bless.